How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? Barry Donadio here. Saturday Morning Vogue review. We've got Kevin Towey, a former immigration officer, law enforcement officer for many, many years, very experienced. It is the 19th of March, 2025, and I've got him on the phone. He's right here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Kevin, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. It will definitely be a pleasure to answer some questions for you and inform people.
Yeah, for anybody watching, I can vouch for this man. I know he's legit. I've seen him in the field doing his job. So he really is an immigration officer. He's been doing it for a long time, but nobody knows your resume like you know it. Like, why don't you just start from the beginning? And I know something that you went through when you were in federal law enforcement training school that is just unbelievable, that I think people want to hear about, because it's just some things that police officers, law enforcement officers go through that people just don't understand the devotion that they have to serve people. So why don't you kick us off where you think is best to start with your resume? Let's hear about it.
All right. Well, I guess for starters, I was born up in Massachusetts, Irish Catholic.
Beautiful.
I had some family members that were involved in the police department, and when I was a young kid, I was always interested in law enforcement.
How
exciting.
Exciting.
I went to college at Old Dominion University, and I minored in criminology. My major was history, and then I moved back to Northern Virginia, and I started, I guess, my first job, I guess you would call it diplomatic security officer, a diplomatic security officer, not an agent, not real, I guess like a security guard. So,
But great job though.
Right.
You're working for the State Department and you're serving the country. You're a federal employee, right? So good job. Good way to start.
Right. Absolutely. That was called career building at that time.
Great.
Obviously, wore a firearm. I protected the State Department. I protected dignitaries. I protected certain embassies that are in and around Washington, D.C. And as you know, there are about, over 100. And, some are locations I would sit out in front of the embassy, either in a post or in a car, and just do guard duty.
See, now the question I have for you, you guys were protecting Blair House, right? Over across the street from the White House? Same thing, or?
No.
It's a different outfit.
We just did the main State Department and
Gotcha.
some of the embassies, and that was it.
Hey, at the end of the day,
security.
Very rewarding job, and thank you for your service there, and not a bad job to have at all. So that sounds great.
Then I bounced to the D.C. Government Protective Service Police, and the guy who was on cops, I can't think of his name, but his claim to fame was he worked for the D.C. Government PSD, Protective Service Division, and of which, when I was with them, I had to go to the Metropolitan Police Academy as a Protective Service police officer, and that was like 2 months at the DC Government at the Metropolitan Police Academy, and I have that certificate.
And what year was that exactly? Around what?
That was like 1991, I believe.
Wow. So things. Yeah, that's around the time I started getting in law enforcement, 1989. Municipal security / law enforcement, and what a different time it was. Wouldn't you say, right? Much, much different back then. But that's great that you got on over there.
Right. I remember wearing the DC government police uniform.
Awesome. Right.
And I remember meeting the older cops back then, and they basically just wore a pistol that was quite worn, and they had a ticket book in their rear pocket, and they had what's called a slapstick, which is basically lead encased by leather. And
so for our viewers, when us young guys came on, the old guys, no kidding, had a leather pouch that was lead on the inside, and I heard them call it a slapjack, and they had that, and I guess they had hit somebody with it. I never owned one, but sure enough, people kept it in their back pocket, and I guess that was somewhat accepted back then. I guess.
Absolutely. And
don't try that today.
As law enforcement professionals, there's like a certain color code on the human body. Like red would be the crotch and the face and head. And, green would be where you go for the arms, the outer legs. And then yellow would be like the stomach. But I'm sure these guys probably just went for the head.
So who knows? But it was used in the place of like what a police baton would be used today, right? So
correct.
It's not like you could just go hog wild and start slapping somebody in the face with it. You probably only extremities, just like the baton today. Is that right?
Right.
It's interesting. It
would be used to de-escalate the situation. Hey, you know what? Just, sit down, shut up, do what I say, or I'm going to take this out and whack you with it. I mean,
holy cow. Right.
Hardcore. But the advocates today and lawyers would go nuts over something like that if they,
I don't think I've seen a slapjack since around the time you're describing, maybe 1991, and they slowly disappeared. But, that's when they started getting the ass batons, the expendable police baton. And, I guess, at that time, if you're using it for extremities, like the baton is, then that almost makes sense to me. But I'd love to ask, because I love police cars, what were you guys driving with those DC units that you were in?
Well, I actually, when I was with them, it was just like a basic police car, but they have advanced rapidly within the last 25 years. So they just had like a basic police car, very basic.
Like probably a Crown Victoria.
But like now it's like modern with the computer, access to, NCIC and all that for people's records. But back then it was basic.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we had a radio, and if you needed a plate check, you had to call it into dispatch and you have to wait. And sometimes you were 6 people behind. That's how busy it was. So you were behind 6 other, patrol units calling in license plates and warrant checks, so it would get rather crowded. But okay, so after that you went on to where?
Right, I actually got a job with the U.S. Capitol Police.
Awesome.
Of note, compared when I went off to the training down in Glencoe, Georgia, that was for 2 months. Unknown to me at the time, my mother developed a brain tumor. And she didn't tell me what was going on, and
neither did your family.
Going in hospice care,
right?
And I just stayed straight on with the police department back then, because back then they did not have what's called FMLA in existence, Family Medical Leave Act. Where,
right.
Hey, I need time off. Let me go deal with my family, and I can get my job back. But if you quit the academy, you would have been fired. So I just had to kind of rough it out and stay at that police academy. And so I came home, and 2 weeks later she was dead. She was in hospice care.
So
that was very rough, and that was dedication on my part to getting in law enforcement and staying at that academy.
I mean, anybody that's watching this right now and not shedding a tear, I'd be shocked. I read your account of that, and I had to pause, and I just said, oh my goodness, your family tried to protect you. Your mother wanted you to succeed so much that she refused to tell you. And it's heart-wrenching. And, if you've never heard it before, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, because this is another example of what law enforcement officers do, first responders, you name it, firefighters. This is what they do, only to have the chance to serve other people. So from me to you, I appreciate that. It was heart-wrenching. I shed a tear. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. What this poor gentleman went through just to serve the people. That should be commended. But that's the sacrifice we make, right? This is the job we do, and we do it, even if we lose our lives. And I'm ready to do that if I have to save another. And I know you will too. And you've proven that, just by that story. So, You came out of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, and your mother passed away literally 2 weeks later.
Correct. And kind of interesting, my last year with ICE, my dad was like ready to die, and he got in hospice care. But actually, it was like during the COVID, they're like, no, you can't visit him in the nursing home. I was like, but I think all the tears from my body had been drained for my mother, so I could deal with my dad's situation. But
yeah,
I actually filed FMLA, and the job just like, So in other words, I would not be sent to the border during the time that when my father was in hospice care.
right.
And other people in the government have filed FMLA, if their wife is pregnant, or even if their girlfriend is pregnant, or if they have ongoing medical issues, or, I don't want to say, questionable on this one, but just saying, it's good that it's there. But unfortunately, when I could have used it, it was not there. And I had to suck it up and deal with it.
Right, of course. Now, your father passed much later than your mom, right? That was many years down.
26 years old versus,
right. Well, I mean, I'm sorry. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I think you turned out great, because you've been serving the people of the United States ever since. And that's what people forget. I know right now in today's culture, there's a lot of hatred or anti-police out there, but, all I've ever wanted to do is serve people, get the bad guy, no matter who or what he was. And then I know you're the same. It didn't matter what race, creed, or color. I wanted the bad guy. So that's what we went for. And, I'm proud to say, and I think you can say the same thing, that we always acted ethically and did the right thing. And, I'm proud of that. I could go to my grave saying that, and I know you can too. But, after Capitol Police is when you went right to immigration, right? And you got a pretty cool uniform. I'm going to share it there on the screen when we get the video up. Basically, it looks like a state trooper uniform to me, but green, right? And
all right, so I went from the Capitol Police, and actually their retirement system is a little bit different than other federal agencies.
That's right.
But yeah. I was given that year of time to my other federal service. So then I joined the U.S. Department of Immigration, which came under the DOJ as a detention enforcement officer. And we wore a green uniform, the same uniform as the Border Patrol agents.
So for my education and the education of the viewers, your job was to go and apprehend people that overstayed a visa, for instance, or just were not here legally. Is that the case, or was it expanded beyond that?
All right, so let me explain immigration prior to 9/11 and then after. So prior to 9/11, you had Border Patrol people that dealt with people at the border, and then you had U.S. immigration. I can't think of like officers who worked at the airport who stamped passports. And
right, that's right. Yep.
Then we had the internal sheriffs. So I was a detention enforcement officer, but primarily my job was to transport aliens to and from court, put them on a bus, and actually drive all the way to Mexico. Then when standards were introduced in 2004, when immigration turned over to ICE, they're like, you know what? You can't put illegals on a bus and drive them for more than 12 hours because they copied BOP standards. But anyways, back to so we had detention enforcement officers. Basically, my job was to pretty much care and maintain the illegals while they were in jail and in our custody and in court, and transport them back home. Now, the deportation officers, they used to call them, really were case officers. They were the ones doing all the legal paperwork against the person that was apprehended, either in jail or at probation parole or by the police or by the fugitive unit and or
quite a process.
At the airport or however.
Yeah, quite a process. And now your description of this is before September 11th, 2001. Now, after that, it changed, right?
So let's go over that a little bit. So basically, that was a really fun job. I loved it.
I bet.
But long days, get up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, go to the jail, put the inmates in the van and drive them to court and then come back for the day. Or every couple of months, we would load a bus with illegal aliens. Yes, the word illegal aliens. And bring them back to Mexico. Now, Mexico is a border country, so they didn't need an official passport or a visa or acknowledgement from the Mexican consulate because border countries, it's easier to deport people. So we would have a bus full of illegal Mexicans that were kind of like gathered together at certain locations on the East Coast and brought down there by bus. And we would drive straight. So it would take us 25 hours to drive from Maryland all the way to the border.
Wow.
And we would just kick them over to Border Patrol and we would walk them across the bridge and I'd be walking with them across the bridge. I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm coming back tomorrow. I'm like, okay, fine.
Wow. So they would say that to you, we're coming back tomorrow.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll bring you back again tomorrow for next,
Wow. Okay. That's crazy. So on that 25-hour ride, did you guys stay at a hotel or something on the way down there, or?
Kind of interesting. It would be 3 of us in a bus. And so, I'd drive as long as I could. I'd just hop in and this was a school bus.
Wow.
So these were actually like Bluebird buses that were like white. They would say U.S. Immigration on them.
Okay.
And they had a toilet in the back, so it stunk like toilet. The air conditioner, there was none. So we just had the windows down, and we'd like try and sleep while we weren't driving. But it was so hot and steamy in there and stunky. I was just like, just trying to.
That's tough. That's a tough job right there.
But it was fun. We were getting our overtime, and it was enjoyable. And we young guys, adventurous. It was fun.
And did you ever have maybe a rebellion on the bus, or anybody ever give you guys trouble?
Oh yes. A lot of times the guys would stand back there and start yelling and screaming and be like, hey, I'd be like, guys, say, shut up. F you, man. We have to go back and forth and just.
Right. I mean, not an easy job and dangerous at the end of the day. And people don't really know about that job. And I can imagine it's unsatisfying because nobody really knows about it and nobody says thanks ever to you. So, thanks for hanging in there. I'm sure you've saved a lot of people from, I'm not saying everybody you deported was necessarily a violent criminal, but who knows, and you might have saved somebody from getting hurt by one of those people that they were being deported. So thank you for that. And then, beyond that job that you were doing, it changed later on. And then what were you doing later on after like 2001? All right,
let me make note of Mexico. I remember when we went down to Mexico at nighttime, we're like, okay, what do you guys want to do? Go out, have a beer somewhere or something. And the Border Patrol agent was like, oh, follow me. He took off his t-shirt, and we went with him, and he's wearing his green pants, his chloroform shoes, and a white t-shirt. And we went into Mexico.
Wow.
And we went to Senor Frog's, and we had beer for like maybe 50 cents. And it was like, what word should I use here? Or terms like people were like nice, happy, and friendly because the cartels were not established yet at that time back in the 90s at the border like they are now. It was safe to go across the border back then.
Right.
But today, actually after around 2003, 2004, the government said, do not go across this border because, the cartel, you will be killed.
I was going to say that would be very dangerous for you and any Border Patrol agent, because at least as far as I know, if they found out you were a Border Patrol agent, they would kill you. And now that's accurate today, probably, right?
Back then,
you were okay. Wow.
Yeah. But
I would never imagine. Yeah. Wow.
And like a lot of these guys were like second generation Mexican from Mexico. And, when they walk over there and the guy that we were with was like, yeah, man, talking to other guys in Spanish. And, oh, yeah, so it's like kind of friendly, like versus now.
I went over, I walked across the border down Texas, Brownsville, and I went to Matamoros. I mean, Mexico was beautiful. I had no idea. I was ignorant. Crossed over there. It was like I was in Miami. And I could speak Spanish, so I told the taxi driver, take me where there is no American. I want to go shopping. And he was very good. He took me to a flea market where, you could get raked over the coals with prices if you just go to where all the Americans go, but I went to where the natives went, and they had prices on all the items, so there was no negotiation, so everything was, rock bottom prices, but it was very nice. Everybody was very kind. Eye-opening experience for me, and I was nothing but thankful for everybody there, and I've done nothing but speak highly of everybody in Mexico since then. I was like, yeah, you got to go over there. Everybody's very, very nice. Now, unfortunately, since then, Matamoros, the city, had gone through some trouble, and then with the cartels, who knows now? I wouldn't recommend it, unless you know what you're doing or where you're going. But ironically, I got to tell you this story. This is funny, because I just simply walked across, and I was kind of dressed very nicely, in a pair of slacks, almost a shirt just like what I'm wearing now, like just a regular collared shirt and a sports jacket. When I walked back, I didn't realize that the Americans give Mexicans like a day pass to go shopping. So they let them right in without any questions asked. Like they just showed us day pass and they go in to shop in Brownsville, Texas. Well, they stopped me. And I'm like, I'm an American, can't you tell? And so they took me to secondary and they wanted my social security number. And they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, I'm here to buy this blanket that I got. And I got a beautiful Mexican blanket for $3. And I've kept it for years and years. But, boy, I guess they thought I was a drug mule or something, because they don't typically see, maybe an overdressed American just go across on foot and come back. So it's kind of funny. I always tell that story, but I was just like, well, Mexican guy here, you just let in with this day pass, but you stopped me for secondary. But no hard feelings, whatever. They were doing their job and everything. But I guess that would have looked kind of suspicious to them back then. And this is the year like 1999. So, maybe things were different. But that's when I was there. It was very beautiful. So I'm sure, your experience over there in Mexico must have been very similar. I would think, right?
Right. Now,
yes.
I was just talking about like one night going across the border. Now,
yeah.
I have deported people to Mexico City on numerous occasions. And of course, I was just wearing plain clothes and I walked around so people didn't know who I was.
Right. And then you had cooperation from Mexican law enforcement. Is that right?
Yes.
Or maybe a little bit.
So for starters, back at the bridge, normally when we would bring them to the bridge, would be, the Mexican law enforcement would see a bunch of guys wearing green and a bunch of people kind of like swarming towards the border. Then they'd be like, all right, what's like this about? And
sure.
Then they'd walk over and be like, okay, we'll take them from here. Thank you. Now, later in my career, in order to deport a person to their respective country, it's like some sort of like international code with like some sort of international agreement with the United Nations that you have to let the host country know that, hey, the citizen of your country has been arrested, and I just can't put this person on a plane and send them to like Poland or Russia.
Right.
We have to let the embassy know. Then the embassy will give us a travel document for that person.
Quite a process. I mean, you know,
we will
harder
to bring him home. But I tell you what, let's close out the chapter with immigration turning into ICE. Then I can get into how ICE does it.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody would love to hear about it.
All right, so I was driving to Baltimore in a bus with illegals, and I remember being up on the 7th floor and watching TV. Oh, a plane flew into the building. I'm like, well, you know what? During World War II, a B-24 bomber flew into the plane because the pilot didn't have radar back then. And all of a sudden, when the second plane hit the Fallon building in Baltimore, they're like, okay, the panic everywhere. They're like, okay, we're closing the building, take these aliens, get them out of here, bring them to a different jail location. And it was kind of like pandemonium in the federal building.
Total pandemonium that day.
We got up and out of there and transported them. Then things stayed the same with us for illegals, and in immigration law, things were still functioning. Then the discussion of Homeland Security was brought about. Then we slowly merged into Homeland Security. So instead of wearing a green uniform, we were wearing tan pants, and then was talk about a blue shirt. It actually ended up being a black shirt. Then we went from wearing like, I always used to joke and say it was like tight polyester, green, useless pants with like a woolly, itchy shirt. Then we went into like more tactical, practical 411 or 911 pants with like the black polo shirt and
the duties changed, right?
Right. So then when we went from a detention enforcement officer to I merged into what was called a immigration enforcement agent, which was a GS 9 position.
Okay.
And we worked with deportation officers, and actually our arrest authority boosted up again. Then actually I had to go back to FLETC for time number 3 or 4 at this point again for a comparative compliance type of academy.
Oh my goodness.
A full 3 months. It was just like a month of immigration law, so I could enforce INA, which stands for the Immigration Nationality.
So for our viewers, that's like going back to high school again for a little while. And not anybody wants to do that.
It was fun, but like some of the legal stuff was like, kind of tricky. And especially immigration law is like really tricky and like very convoluted and confusing. And the basic of immigration law is that they have just the law of the land and the law of the blood. I need to Google that. Justice Soleil and so in other words, as long as you were born in the U.S. and or if your parents were U.S. citizens, then you were a U.S. citizen. But where it got confusing is like if you were naturalized or you are a green card holder, then you were arrested, and it was within 3 years of a crime of moral turpitude or this or that, then you could lose your green card holder status and be deported. Just like everyone was screaming 2 weeks ago about that guy, Khalil. Oh my God, he has a green card holder. You can't do that. Yes, you can. If you have a green card holder here, you're a guest until you become a U.S. citizen. That's what I heard the judges say in the courtroom, and you can be deported.
Yeah, I mean, that was my understanding all my entire life. Like, I'm not going to go to pick a country, I don't know, Belgium. If I'm there on a visa and I get in trouble, I would have to assume they're going to deport me. I think I would be nothing short of crazy to say, well, I guess they'll just let me stay and everything will be fine. But I don't know where people get the idea, some of the ideas in their heads, and I think it's just lack of education, or they just don't read. They don't read the law, or they have no clue, and I guess they believe everything they hear on the news, and where somebody like yourself, you know what you're talking about, and you enforce this law. And that's why I'm glad to have you, because maybe this will clear some stuff up for people. I guess I want to ask you the question I think everybody wants to know the answer to from a fellow like you. I mean, what is the deal with the immigration? I mean, is it that much different between administrations? I mean, you've served under different presidential administrations. I mean, who really is the king of deporting people, or who's the king of immigration enforcement, I should say? Who is really the one who really does it? Now, I know what we hear on the news. I have my favorites as president. I'm a Donald Trump supporter. But what's the deal? You were there. You were a foot soldier for immigration. I mean, if it was Obama, I've heard that he was big on immigration enforcement. But coming from where you were, what did you see?
All right. So earlier, let me actually correct myself. So, all right. So it's legal term saying just soleil, or right of the soil, is a principle of nationality law that determines the citizenship based on the place of birth. It contrasts with just sanguinis, where citizenship is based on the nationality of one's parents. So that was my guideline as an immigration enforcement agent and as an ICE officer. Where were you born? Like for instance, whenever I would interview someone out in the field, I would say, okay, what is your name? Of what country are you a citizen or a national? Guatemala. Okay. Where were you born? Guatemala. Of what country are your parents citizens of and or nationals of? Guatemala. But then it would get kind of murky if they're like, well, and I'd be like, okay, that's good enough, into custody. But where it would get murky is like if one parent was American and then he was born here, okay, let's check a couple of things. How old were you when? But the best person to ask some of these questions would be, or actually, is like Mark Levin on Twitter, because he talks about immigration law a little bit. But anyways, let's talk about.
But even he doesn't have your experience. So
all right. So actually, under Obama, we actually went out. This is where I should think it was kind of sneaky, because Obama had no problem with us going out and arresting illegal aliens. And under his term, when he was president, we would actually show up at courtrooms and arrest people. And that I believe these NGOs then complained to, some Democrats that were friends with Obama, how that chain goes, and say, hey, immigration officers are bothering us at courthouses. So then under Obama, he's like, okay, guys, stop going to courthouses to like grab these people.
Right.
But and then under Obama, the idea of sanctuary cities came about. I'm almost thinking it was like, you do me this favor, I'll do one for you. So in other words, the illegals or the advocates under the Obama administration, like, you know what? We'll have certain safe spaces. Liberals love that word, safe spaces. And there are safe spaces where sanctuary cities, where kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, okay, we won't go there, but you can get them here. And it's kind of interesting how that worked out.
So, Kevin, before Obama, and I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking, and I don't remember, but before Obama, there were no sanctuary cities, no word of it. So it was them.
So when we were first established as ICE, I'm not going to say it was the Wild West, but there weren't as many rules, there weren't as many restrictions.
Right.
When I arrested the person, I didn't have to give them a list of free legal services and a list of free legal service providers, and say, okay,
right,
who do you want to call? I guess you could say we were just finding ourselves back in the Bush era.
Right.
When Bush was president.
And are we talking
big
Daddy Bush or Son Bush?
What now?
We're talking Bush Senior, or are we talking Junior?
Junior.
Okay, because you started really with immigration maybe back when Clinton was in, right? I mean, we're talking.
God.
Yeah, we're going back. We're not getting any younger either.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
And
I mean, even Clinton. I don't recall Clinton ever being anti-police. Really, I don't recall unless you experienced it. But anti-police or pro-sanctuary city. I don't recall that. Maybe you do. I don't want to give somebody a bad rap, if, he may be on the other side of the aisle from me, but the truth is the truth. I assume Bush was strong on immigration. Things were different with Obama, you're saying, and then you had, the Trump administration, his first administration came in. Was that somewhat liberating for you guys? Did he take the leash off for you guys and just say, hey, you guys are going to, start doing enforcement like you've never done before? Or how was that at that time when Trump came in the first administration?
all right. I'm actually looking at. All right, so like when I did start, you are right. Clinton was president, and then we just immigration didn't make the news.
Right, that's right. Yeah, it didn't.
And then we went from Clinton to Bush Jr. So I was there with Bush Jr., all the way back from Clinton. And I remember Clinton put forth a bunch of executive orders. Or it was called the Immigration Natural, some sort of INA Act of 1995, something like that, to start immigration law and enforcement. But anyways, to answer your question under Trump. So once Trump, all right, so when Obama was in office, the best way to say this is kind of I was actually at a conference and in a meeting, and the way it was spoken to us from an administrator was well, you know what? When the police are out on patrol, and let's say that they go to a party and there are 100 kids there drinking beer. I mean, are you going to arrest all of them or just the ones creating the problems?
Right.
Because obviously the police can't arrest every kid at a beer party. I mean,
right.
So they just said, be careful who you arrest under Obama. Just use guidance. Just use guidance wisely. So they kind of streamlined it. And actually, the head of Homeland Security back then was Jay Johnson. And you can still see him on Fox News. But some people say, well, he actually put forth, I can't remember what they were called, but a bunch of memos telling us to kind of streamline and be arrest illegal aliens, but maybe don't do work site enforcements, don't get collaterals, meaning if you arrest the subject at the house and you see 5 other illegals just standing in there, just kind of focus on the one person.
Right.
Let's not get
overwhelmed, I guess, or
let's not make immigration look like you guys are using Gestapo tactics. So again, when we first started out, you could say under Bush, it's kind of the wild years. We just got started. We were more free or able to do what we wanted to. Then under Obama, things were curtailed by the memos set forth by upper management to kind of curtail us. And believe me, it's not like we're out there, walking around at a 7-Eleven and hey, where are you from? Hey,
right. I mean, you have specific targeting or
targets,
right?
Yeah. All right. And now, when Trump got back in office, those guidelines were put in a trash can, and Trump is like, okay, you know what? Just refer to the INA, the Immigration National Act. Where are you from? Guatemala. How did you get here?
Mm-hmm.
Illegal? Did you come here legally? Or okay?
So he kind of let you guys kind of do your job.
We get a bond, a court date within a year. But but like if they were criminal, they would be, gathered like at certain locations, brought to a certain place,
Right.
brought to Texas, and then, brought home via ICE air, flights to Mexico, flights to Guatemala, flights to El Salvador, flights to Jamaica and other, I guess you would call them like exotic countries. And, that's where ICE was like really fun for me, because I always enjoyed traveling overseas, going on these ICE air flights.
That would be cool.
A whole commercial plane with like 100 guys from India, a certain flight going to Africa with a bunch of guys who were like fighting and very combative. Or just on a commercial plane, at the very back of the plane, I would bring someone back home to Jamaica. I'd fly in the back of the plane with them, right near the toilet, always flushing and stinky, sitting on the back of the plane. And then once we landed in Jamaica, I'd just turn them over to immigration. And then I'd walk in line, show him my passport. I'd walk out the door, and I'd see the guy that I just deported. He's like, "Hey, man, how are you?" I'm like, "Oh, okay." Oh, he's like, "Hey, I have family here. You need a ride to your hotel?" I'm like, No, I'm good.
And it was that cordial
and cool.
Wow.
To the people that I deported.
Well, if you treat somebody, in our law enforcement career, I see this, and I've learned it. You treat somebody with kindness, courtesy, and compassion, even if they have handcuffs on, that goes a long way. You might run into that person, and they may save you, save your butt one day. Who knows? But that's the practice I always did. I always treated everybody that way too. So maybe you were just doing the job so well that guy was like, yeah, let me see if I could help this guy out. Although he just deported me. How interesting, But I think what we're learning is that it really does matter who's the president, because it kind of just changes. You're in the same job. Sometimes you're allowed to do your job to the fullest. Other times you're kind of restrained. That's not what, like, maybe the older people are used to. I guess maybe Clinton and before, I think everybody presidents didn't tell the immigration, oh, well, don't do this, don't do that. I think they just stayed out of that, as my understanding of it all. But, so under Trump's first administration, you guys were basically just doing the job you're supposed to be doing. And then, did you get a piece of working under Biden, or were you already out?
Yes. So, kind of like clue. How things were going on. All right. So again, back up the clock here. So under Bush, it was the wild days. You guys get started. Not too much guidance on us under Obama. Okay, you guys can only arrest certain illegal aliens at large with a criminal record, only with a criminal record, or if they're here illegally, put them in proceedings, but they'll probably get loose. And then Trump, it was like, okay, open up the immigration books.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair game, buddy. And
I mean, if they're here illegally, it is a crime.
Now, all right.
Right?
So under Biden, Mayorkas was, head of Homeland Security.
Right. That's right.
And we were very clued in. Within 3 weeks of him getting that job, he sent us guidance. He said, you cannot use the word illegal alien anymore. You need to use the word migrant or non-citizen.
So it's true. I mean, because, we hear, I'm in politics, I get it, things are said to sway opinions, but it's true, right? I mean, I've heard it on the news, but that's not my major source of information. But, getting it from somebody like you that has actually done it. So you're able to verify it, and basically Mayorkas kind of was working against you guys, or what?
Yes. All right. So he put forth that memo that we have to call illegal aliens, that we were used to calling them. We have to call them migrants or non-citizens.
I guess whatever.
More you're like left-wing people that I used to discuss this with lawyers. They used to always get upset. Oh, like more left-wing lawyers. Oh, why are you saying illegal alien? And then some people say, well, You're on stolen land. The border should be open. Everyone should be able to come here. How did your ancestors come here? See, so it gets more like political. That's why they believe in the open borders, colonizers, colonists, and that's why they're so.
Well, hey, maybe we should save it
about using that term illegal alien, because they're like, it's stolen land. How do you have the right to tell him? So that's why they get so spun out when they hear that term.
Right.
And I remember during the presidential debate, it was on one of those debates. I think somebody said illegal alien. Then the news reporter's like, oh my, the word illegal alien like 2 years ago was almost like a curse word. Now it's like,
that's right. Yeah.
I
remember it. And
yes.
I was like, you could call it what you want, but you're under arrest. How's that sound? You could, if I'm there to arrest you because you're not here legally, well, you could call it whatever you want. You could call yourself the Tooth Fairy if you want to, but turn around, place your hands behind your back, and don't move them. You're under arrest. How's that sound? So I would be very customer friendly, but I would be giggling in the background saying, okay, this is a little bit awkward that we can't say certain words in this country anymore. Beyond the Constitution, freedom of speech, in my opinion, that's bizarre. But so I guess his administration under Mayorkas, although I mean he was an attorney, he was a federal attorney, which surprises me, right? He was a prosecutor, at least I thought he was at one before. So you would think he would be kind of like prosecuting criminals. But I guess not.
Before, if I remember correctly, I believe he was his second in charge when Obama was in office. Then the second memo he kicked forth, I'm looking at it right now. You can look at it online, dated September 30th, 24. Guidelines for the enforcement of civil immigration law. See how they're calling it civil immigration law.
Yeah, that's not accurate. It's criminal. Yeah,
and the first part of the memo is foundation, the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. Then they have three priorities: threat to national security, terrorists at the border, because it's still the danger from 9/11. Then somebody who is a threat to public safety, a non-citizen who poses a threat to public safety because of serious criminal conduct, the gravity of the offense, conversely.
Sure.
And lastly, the threat to border security. In other words, a person at the border.
So that's how they prioritize who you should be going after.
And then they put in here protection of civil rights and civil liberties. Hey, you know what? That's why those protesters were not prosecuted under Biden, terrorizing the Jewish students on campus because of the Democrats view that as it's their civil rights and it's their civil liberties.
Let me pause. I mean, doing that to anybody, any race, creed, or color is unacceptable for me, and I know it is for you. I'd step up and protect any group that was being terrorized. Like you're mentioning, that's just totally unacceptable. I'll also say, hey, if I was at January 6th at the Capitol, I'd be trying to help the police. And I'm a big, huge Trump supporter, but I'd be like, listen, you guys are out of hand. You're not going to touch the police. That's my bottom line. Once that got out of control and cops were getting assaulted, that's unacceptable. But, I mean, I agree with you. Some of this stuff is, aggravating to say the least, and you have to scratch your head and wonder, okay, we're electing officials to represent the people of the United States and Americans, not somebody from other countries. Now, we're a country of immigrants. We're all immigrants. I'm Sicilian. The other half of the family is Irish, Scottish. And there's a difference though. We came legally. I get the Statue of Liberty and everything and coming to Ellis Island, but they came legally, and that's the big difference. Now, I personally, and maybe I should ask you how you feel, I think there should be some kind of a path forward. Maybe, if you need a path forward here, maybe having people serve in the military, I think would be a great idea to give them a chance to, prove their loyalty to the United States or something like that. I don't have all the answers, but some kind of a path, especially for, I have empathy for anyone that is here that loves this country, but just happens to be here illegally. And then they're kind of like trapped and they don't have a way out, so I don't know, you may have the answer. I should ask you, what's the answer? How do we solve this problem? There's good people here, which I see. There are good people here that probably are not here legally. I guess the answer is self-deport yourself and try again, maybe? What do you say?
I honestly don't know. And, out of all the illegal aliens I've had my care and custody, certainly a lot of them I've felt sympathy for. We can talk about a guy that I deported to Russia.
Wow.
Interesting. But a lot of them, just got like a DUI or a couple of DUIs, and the guy's working his butt off all the time, and he's supporting a USC wife, and he has 2 kids with her, and he's getting deported. And then the lady comes to the ICE office crying and like, oh, you can only bring him a 50-pound bag to send him home with. And it's like, and I'm kind of shaking my head, pondering thoughts. I'm like, well, you know what? I kind of wish we like caught a serious, more criminal type of guy instead of the 3-time drunk. But I'm just trying to scale it, because there are some awful people that have deported.
Sure, there are. I mean, but I'll tell you, Kevin,
who are illegally, So I guess when I'm older, maybe I have more sympathy for them. Or
sure, yeah, and that's that you're a compassionate man, and that's why we need people like you in a law enforcement capacity, because we all know there's bad people in law enforcement. There's going to be a 1% of 1% that shouldn't be doing that job. But I'm compassionate. You're compassionate. That's why I appreciate your service. Anybody listening needs to appreciate your service to this country. But, on the other hand, right, there are people that come here, and I have empathy for them too. Don't get me wrong. But I can't personally expect, if I decide to go pick a country, I don't know, Portugal. If I decide to go to Portugal illegally, I can't possibly expect to stay there if they catch me. They're going to put me in jail. I already know this. They're going to put me in jail, and they're going to deport me. I mean, this is the only country where I guess people expect, oh, well, no, we can't deport somebody who is here illegally. Try that in some other countries, and you might end up in jail over there a very long time before they deport you. Aren't I right? I mean, they're not just going to say, oh, well, we're going to send them back to the USA like tomorrow. You might get stuck a few months in some compound if you tried doing this, if I'm an American or even overstayed a visa somewhere in Portugal, for instance. They're going to put me in a jail cell, right? They're not going to let me stay there. There's not a sanctuary city for Americans anywhere in the world that we can illegally go to a country and stay there. Am I right? Or maybe you know of one. I'm not aware of one.
I don't really know the specific answer to that, but like sometimes I guess if you're an American and you do go to a country and you say, hey, I bought a condo here or something, they might be a little bit more lenient with you. But your premise is correct.
Right.
Most countries, even the ones even the most poorest African countries I've been to, when the plane lands there, I have to go through immigration.
Of course.
And in that African country before I came there, I have to have an official passport. And then I have to have a visa in that passport.
Right.
Or sometimes the U.S. official passport is good enough. But yes, I would not want to be in that country and violate, my visit by overstaying or something like that. And who knows what would happen to you. But most of the time you'd probably be held and you could probably pay your way out of it.
Maybe, right. Right, but my point is that people that are here and they're here illegally, they can't blame anybody but themselves. Like if they either overstay their visa or they just simply decide to, pay a coyote or a cartel member to get them across the border. And I understand Mexico can be rough. They might be escaping something terrible there to come here. Believe me, I empathize. But if you're here illegally, you can't possibly be aggravated at anybody but yourself. If you're here, put yourself in that position, and now they take you and deport you. And it just seems to me in this country, it's like the mindset is, well, it's like you, the immigration officer's fault or the government's fault. And well, why don't you let them stay? And well, that means they get to get away with crime. So if they get to get away with breaking a law, maybe I should be able to get away with robbing a bank, right? Like they want the ideology is they want certain people to be able to break the law because it's a sad case, for instance, but the sad case is like multiplied by over 1 million. I could even rationalize once in a while, but it's like 1 million. And, you're going to allow people to just simply, well, they have a hard time or they have children here and now you're going to separate the family. Well, if I rob a bank or I break a rule of crime, I should say, if I commit a crime, I'm going to be separated from my family. I'm going to be in a jail cell. Right? So that's my 2 cents on it, but I'm going to let you close out. We've been talking a while and I'll have you back on because, you're a great guest and I learned some stuff from you today. And I really just love talking with you. It's always a good time with you, but, give me some final thoughts and we'll close out.
All right. So obviously we talked about the Biden administration as Tom Homan would say, putting shackles and handcuffs on the ICE officers. Well, now Trump's back in office. Pretty much we're enforcing immigration law again.
Yeah.
And probably the best point of reference would be like Google Tom Homan and see what he's saying about what they're doing now, what their policies are now. But Biden let in too many people. The borders were open.
Misled them.
Deported, and it's a mess to clean up. And we're trying to clean up that mess right now. It's just, I don't know if he was the one doing it or if that auto pen but Americans were killed. Yeah. Americans were disgusted.
No doubt.
Americans
no doubt
voted Trump in office because of those immigration policies. And when you have illegals swarming your neighborhood and they're sitting in like a house and they're partying and drinking all day and smoking weed and they're getting money and or a credit card and they're just like jerking around all day, just being stupid. People like, okay, enough. Now, a lot of these people are here illegally, and kind of interesting to note that they're here illegally, but they're here to make money, then go back home and move to Mexico or Central America, where it's cheaper to live. And actually, Americans now are moving to these countries because it's cheaper to live.
Right.
So a lot of them are coming here to do good. A lot of them, a certain percentage, a smaller percentage, are up to no good or get involved in criminal activity. Right.
I mean, the majority of people that I see, and they're, the ones that I'm considering could even be here illegally, and I don't know, but they seem to be El Salvadorian, Guatemala, and Honduras. And these are, husband, wife with children, Christian family members. And I say to myself, boy, I just hope they're here legally because they're the immigrants I want here. There's immigrants that I want here. Ones that love America. Ones that, come, go to work, pay their taxes just like the rest of us and hang Old Glory outside of their front door of their house. Those are the immigrants I want. And it doesn't matter what race they are. I could care less, but I want people here that love America and they're going to help us, be a greater country even more than what we are. And, I know you're like that. I mean, you're pretty much the same as me. You're a compassionate fellow where, I think you have the empathy that I do that, you don't want anybody to suffer if you could help them, that's how I am. But, interesting subject. I really appreciate you being on the show, educating me. I've seen you at work. Thank you for what you've done. You have made us safer. I've seen you work, on the eastern shore of Maryland. So you've kept some people off the streets that, really didn't belong here and had a criminal record. Yeah. So thank you. My family appreciates what you've done. And, I'm going to have you on again. We will talk. 100% going to have you on because the Maryland legislature, from what I'm reading, is trying to pass a law to make it illegal to help federal agencies identify. They're not allowed to share databases with federal authorities who are enforcing immigration. That's how I'm reading the law. I ought to get it up on the screen when I do this, but check into it. I think I'm right on that one, but it hasn't been, passed yet. It's just something in the legislation. So I'm just like mind boggled by that. But, that's what's happening. So we'll talk again.
Okay. Well, for starters, Maryland passed, I think it was called like detention or like compassion before detention. So illegal aliens cannot be housed in jails in the state of Maryland anymore. And actually some jails were disappointed because, that the government was giving them a budget to house these illegals. But so instead of being there, I guess they'll have to go to another state, to a federal facility. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I can't visit so.
Well, I just hope if
Democrats are doing really doesn't make any sense, but.
I just hope if I can't pay my rent, they'll do the same for me because I'm a U.S. Veteran. I've sacrificed time away from my family, and been in conflict zones. So I wonder if they'll do that for our veterans like they'll do that for somebody who, is an illegal alien. I just only hope. But, thanks so much for being with us, and, we will have you on again.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a great night. All right.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.